In this video, we'll discuss the features on Sean Combs' face that point to a driven and expressive nature and his potentially high and unwieldy sexual urges. Enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to another face reading. Today we've got P. Diddy. So I decided to read him because a number of people had messaged me, suggested him. He appears to be in a little bit of hot water right now, so I'm going to go through, give a breakdown of his face, the things that I'm seeing in relation to the allegations that he's going through. So the thing to remember with face reading is that you can't be psychic or predictive, at least not in my capacity. But what we can do is look at people's life terrain, look at what they're going through, look what their face says, and see if we can find some kind of congruency in that process. And if we do, we're better at face reading and we can navigate the world a bit better and ourselves a bit better, hopefully. If you're new to my channel, welcome, but please go up here and watch the 5-minute crash course face reading video. That's very important if you've never seen a face reading, so I strongly encourage you to go watch that if you haven't seen it. If you're liking my content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and share this with people who you think might find it interesting. I appreciate it. So, in looking at P. Diddy's face, the first thing that I notice is the length of his face. So, it's the wood element. The wood element shows up in a number of videos that I read when I'm looking at people. This is characterized by the long rectangular face. So when we see this doesn't dictate everything about a person, nor does any single feature. We have to read everything together. But the larger takeaway when we see this long face is that the wood metrics are going to frame the person's life to a degree. Now, as I've said before, wood metrics, vigor, intensity, sex drive, pushing, getting your message and driving it or hammering it into the world. That's all wood energy. So if we look at his life terrain, who he is, what he's done, being a very expressive artist, that's been very true in the context of who and what he is. Now the thing to remember with these things is when we see these metrics, ideally a person has to find an avenue to express those metrics. If your face carries it, you need to wield it, is the basic idea. And this can come in a lot of different packages. It doesn't have to be one way. As they say in the East, there are many different paths to the top of the mountain. So, going back to what I just said about his expressive nature, if we look at his mouth, a very full mouth. So, the mouth relates to the 5 senses. When we see a very full mouth, we're looking at sensory expression, a person who enjoys the senses, also a person who likes to express. And given that he is a musical artist, we can definitely see this expression metric being expressed in his life in real time. So that's something to note. Now, what I did notice about his mouth is that his upper lip is smaller than his lower lip, and not by a huge factor, but noticeably. And so this is one of the telltale metrics, according to face reading, where we can see sort of a surplus in the libido, a surplus in the sexual urges, kind of a hedonistic nature. The more moisture that shows on the inner lower lip, so when a lip sort of protrudes like this naturally, and you can see that moisture on the inside, the more hedonistic the tendencies are in the person, usually. Now, if we just see, he doesn't carry that, but when we see the full lower lip, we're also looking at a propensity for hedonistic or a higher drive in sexual urges and that kind of a thing. So I did find that interesting because the allegations that he's up against right now are not good. There is racketeering, sex trafficking, sexual advances and sexual assault on underage girls. There's a lot of things that do not look good, and who knows where this is all going to go. But again, since he was in the media, he's kind of trending right now, I thought I would give him a read. So outside of that, when I'm looking at his eyes and when he smiles, one of the things that I noticed was the lack of fire. So fire happens when we wrinkle. Anywhere we see wrinkling, that's going to be a metric or an indicator for the fire element. Now, when a person smiles, ideally they get some kind of wrinkling around the eyes. When we see that, that's sort of like the fire element being fully extracted from the person, and it means the person's capacity to feel joy, embody joy, and happiness stays. It means that it's part of their terrain. It stays probably or lingers a bit longer than the average person, and that's a good thing. We want those joy metrics, those happiness metrics to be present. Why? Life is pretty rough if you haven't noticed. It's pretty difficult going through life. We're all going to get schooled in a lot of different ways, in a lot of different capacities. And so when we have that, this is why it's seen as a fortuitous or auspicious marker in face reading. When we have these lines, it means that you are able to hold on to your joy longer. So when he smiles, he doesn't have any joy lines. These lines don't show up. That doesn't mean that he's an unhappy person. What it means is that joy and happiness can be fleeting. There can be kind of a bipolar-like nature with holding on to joy and feeling the downs of life. So he has this, and I wonder, about his life terrain, what he's going through, and if these things are true, how potentially that maybe lack of joy or lack of the ability to hold on to happiness, how that relates to his life path. Again, there's only so much I can read from looking at a person's face and not interfacing with them one-on-one, because so much of face reading is about reading the Shen. And the Shen, or the spirit, the consciousness of a person, is read the best face-to-face live, when you can see a person talking and interacting. And when they're interacting with you, that's where a lot of this comes into play. So the other piece I'll say here that was something that stood out to me that I noticed was he's got this sort of fleshy-like thing going on right here, sort of on the upper brow. Some of the pictures, depending on the lighting, you can see it. And this is where it's almost like a bulbous protrusion above the eyebrows. So when we see that, when we see sort of like these topographical elevations, if we're thinking of the face as a map, as a topography of sorts, when we see that elevation, or we see something prominent that kind of comes up, it caught my eye. One of the things that I'm thinking about is the geography of where we're seeing this. The upper brow and the eyebrows are the wood element. Now, if you look at his eyebrows, he's got some pretty thick, bushy eyebrows. So again, we're going to see sex drive, vigor, pushing, being aggressive. All these things can come into play. And it doesn't mean a person is always explicitly that. You can't look at features like that. But it means they have the capacity to wield it, which he does. But then when we see this protrusion here, any kind of elevation where something becomes more dominant, where it raises off of the face, we're going to see those metrics in the area of the face that relate to that element. We're going to see those metrics go up. So this area relates to the wood element. So the upper brow and the eyebrows are all wood territory. And so when I see this on him, again, in relation to what I'm seeing in the news, who knows? I'm not making any accusations here, but these are allegations. But it makes me wonder about that very high wood drive. And then when we see that expressive mouth and those kinds of things, that's something to think about. Now, the other piece of this is, and this is just kind of a personal assessment, P. Diddy's eyes, there's something in his eyes that have never, prior to all of this, that have never totally sat well with me. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's how close sitting they are, or how the energy comes out, but there seems something kind of distant in the eyes. And again, people will say, like, well, why are you reading that? So what? That's a feeling. That's the layer of Shen in face reading. It's the immaterial. It's that sense you get from a person by looking at their eyes. And in looking at his eyes, there's something kind of distant. I don't want to say apathetic, but something kind of distant and maybe kind of cold in the eyes. So these are some of the things, these are metrics, if I was reading him in real time, I would be asking him and probing into these things, because, here, when I'm reading someone's face, I can't probe and ask and inquire. I can't dig in and sort of unearth their life terrain. So I'm very limited in doing this, but these are some of the things that I would be talking about with P. Diddy. These are some of the things that I would be looking for, assessing, and tracking to hopefully help him regulate his life force a bit better, because in the end, that's what face reading is about. I read your face, or the face reader reads your face, and then they try to assess what's happening in relation to your face and how your life force and how your life terrain are expressing in real time. And hopefully that person or me can help you a bit better. So that's all I've got for P. Diddy today. If you guys have questions, comments, whatever, put them down below, and I'll do my best to answer them.